Thank you very, very much for inviting me to share my reflection on behalf of 49 least developed countries, which are most vulnerable. And you all know climate is changing. And these 49 countries are not at all responsible for this changing climate. But these are the countries at the receiving end, are innocent victims. So now we are going to craft another new treaty in, say, 8-9 months. Are we ready for that? In climate change negotiation, which kicked off in 1990 to 92, we have crafted the very beautiful convention called United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And it was initialed in 1992 at Rio by our head of the states and governments. Then we agreed to stabilize the temperature regime, greenhouse gas emission. We agreed to cut back. And that was again discussed in Kyoto in the form of Kyoto Protocol. And over there, some countries were grouped as Annex 1 parties, like UK, EU, USA, Australia, Japan. All these industrialized countries were grouped as Annex 1 countries, and they were asked to be responsible for these anthropogenic climatic changes. And they were also asked to bear the burden, especially for adaptation in developing countries, technology transfer and capacity building, and also for mitigation support. And in Kyoto, we have crafted another beautiful market mechanism called Clean Development Mechanism, CDM. And this CDM were supposed to deliver lot of carbon reduction. But at the end of the day, it couldn't deliver that much as expected. And only very few developing countries could reap benefits from CDM. Countries like China, India, Brazil, they could access CDM benefits, reap CDM benefits to a great extent. But other developing countries collectively couldn't get even, say, 20% of CDM benefits. Then also CDM sales proceeds fallen down. CER price has fallen down drastically. And 2% levy or 2% sales proceeds of CDM were supposed to channel to adaptation fund. Only 2% of CER price should go to the adaptation fund to finance adaptation needs of developing countries. Since the price plummeted like anything, the adaptation fund reduced to an empty shell. So it couldn't work. And also joint implementation mechanism, that also didn't fly that way, didn't work that way. So now we are going to craft the Paris Agreement, Paris Treaty in couple of months. Before us now 86-page huge documents, text. there are so many options. Say for a single paragraph, you have say 90 different options, 20 different options, 10 different options. Say UK has proposed something, Bangladesh has proposed something which is completely opposed to each other. Say Bolivia is proposing something quite unique, or say Russia proposed something else. So how to strike a middle ground? How to arc out a landing zone? We have only couple of weeks negotiating time right now before Paris. So within this, say 3 weeks negotiating time before Paris, can we deliver a treaty in Paris? The treaty, say the least developed countries, our group of countries, would like to see an ambitious one, robust one, fair one. Can we have that given this very short negotiating time right now? Then also we are asked to have our intended nationally determined contribution. All countries, all parties, 196 countries are supposed to provide intended nationally determined contributions, which should be given by this month. Then it has been extended to even up to September this year. And these INDCs are supposed to prepared by the countries through a consultative process. How many countries are doing that in a consultative process, so that they can own it, the people of each country can own it, say that this is our intended nationally determined contribution of UK or EU or say Bangladesh or say Bolivia or say Saudi Arabia or any country. Even if we all 196 countries are going to submit our INDCs by even September, would that be aggregated to a global temperature goal of 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees? My personal guess is it will not. It will be much lower than 2 degree global temperature rise goal. So we are going to face a huge gap. How we are going to meet that huge gap? That will be again a huge challenge before us in Paris to deliver a treaty, a robust treaty, an ambitious treaty. That means, are we going to cut back our emission drastically, significantly, so that we can arrest the temperature rise within 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees? It will be a Herculean task. But as far as Year 5 report and other assessments are concerned, it can be done. But are our political will galvanized to deliver that treaty? As a negotiator, I find it very difficult to deliver an ambitious treaty in Paris. But we aspire an ambitious treaty in Paris. And in that treaty, the common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, which we have agreed in our convention, spelled out, enshrined in our convention, that should also lead the process. so that according to that principle the gap can be distributed among parties. Those who are say responsible, those who have capabilities, they should contribute more, they should commit more, and it should be on the basis of equity, fairness, justice. So burden sharing is a challenging task. How we share the burden, and also adaptation is an important issue. Say for these developed countries, mitigation is the highest priority. But even if there is, say, mitigation, ambitious mitigation, because of the current emission level, we need to adapt. So we had a huge adaptation requirements, adaptation deficit right at this moment. So we need to raise the adaptation ambition for even shorter run. For that we need lot of finance, investment, because to raise the capacities, resilience, coping capacities and resilience of developing countries, most vulnerable countries, it requires lot resources and also technologies, because technology is not that much available. So we have to also raise technologies to the community level, to the ground level, take adaptation onto the ground. And in this convention on climate change, adaptation has been a bad boy for many years. So this time we want in Paris Treaty, adaptation should get promoted at least at a level compared to mitigation, so that adaptation profile is enhanced, and adaptation and mitigation should go hand in hand. And even if we do mitigate, that should have some adaptation co-benefits, and for adaptation we need to ensure mitigation co-benefits. Say in Bangladesh coast, we want to raise our resilience, we want to build dikes along our, say, coastal belt. In those dikes, you need to, say, use cements and other materials, construction materials, which will raise the level of emission. So how best you ensure that those emission can be reduced, low carbon can be used over there, so that there are some mitigation benefits can be tapped, can be ensured. Or say Sundarban mangrove forest, say we want to preserve that, we want to expand that. That is an adaptation, but that will also give mitigation benefits, co-benefits, because there are sinks. If we can expand that, increase that, raise that, then we can also get some mitigation co-benefits. So how these things are enshrined in Paris Treaty, that will be very important for the most vulnerable countries. And also means of implementation, means finance, technology, capacity building, those are important. We have Green Climate Fund, agreed upon, $100 billion per annum from 2020. but how many, say, programs can be supported through that $100 billion in, say, 136 developing countries, and whether the, say, Green Climate Fund readiness is there, even if, say, there are funds, there are, say, resources in the KT, Green Climate Fund. Can Bangladesh or Maldives or, say, Somalia, Ethiopia access that? Because there are also not that much readiness for accessing resources. So, GCF readiness should be there, and also we have to ensure predictability of finance, adequacy of finance, new and additional resources generation, so that country A or B would know that we are going to get this much resources and they can plan well advance. Prudent planning can be operated. So those kind of questions needs to be addressed in Paris in the form of a new treaty. But major issue, or say horny issue, is the say review process, say INDCs. If, say, all countries submit their INDCs, whether it is okay, can meet the 2-degree global goal, that should be assessed, ex ante assessment should be there, and also there should be a review process. That review process will ensure that whether there are some lapses, some gaps, and whether we need to raise our level of ambition. Those issues should be answered, but there are differences of opinion among parties. Some parties are strongly opposed to any kind of review, any kind of, say, accounting, and also the question of, say, human rights are there. Some countries do want to have human rights enshrined in the new treaty, some are opposed to it. The question of equity are not also taken everyone in the same line. So, within this couple of months, how best we can craft a new treaty, a robust, ambitious, fair, equitable treaty, which can ensure 2-degree global goal, which can raise mitigation ambition, adaptation ambition, finance ambition, technology transfer ambition, capacity building ambition, is a huge challenge before us. But hopefully we can have a treaty at the end of the day in come December in Paris. But whether it will be ambitious one or it will just flag the low-hanging fruits, whether it will be a loose one, loose treaty, not legally binding one. We want a legally binding treaty, whether it will be a legally binding one or not, whether it will be aspirational. So those questions we have to answer now. What would be the legal form of this new treaty, new agreement? Legal nature, form is important. So there are lot of questions still we are exploring. We have to answer those in the form of crafting a robust treaty. But there are, fortunately, all the elements within that 86 pages in the form of text. But we have to brought it down in a very precise, concise form, a shorter form, like a treaty, like an agreement or protocol. There are also disagreement among parties so far regarding whether it should be called as a protocol, whether it should be called a legal treaty, legally binding treaty, or an agreement with legal force. So what does it mean by an agreement with legal force? Those are still under debate. So within this short period of time, we have to answer and explore the new treaty as an agreement of 196 countries. And when we have crafted the convention itself in 1991-92, the whole political economy of climate change was quite different. At that point of time, only industrialized countries were the major emitters. But now, right at this moment, there are also changes in that atlas. There are also, right at this moment, the largest emitter, current emitter is China, then USA. USA has been historically the largest emitter, but right now it has been reduced to a second position. China has overtaken, but China is a developing country. Okay. Then India is also coming up. But we have to bear in mind that both in China and India, there are a lot of poor people are there. They are not emitting, but the national emission is high. So how best we can take all these major emitters in the fold of one legally binding treaty is another horn issue, because there were firewalls drawn in the convention in 1991-92 that there will be Annex 1 and non-Annex 1. Whether we can be able to collapse that firewalls. But in Durban, in that conference of parties, we have agreed under Durban platform that all countries will join this new treaty, new agreement in Paris. But how much, which country is going to commit or pledge is yet to be determined. So now we have to make a serious analysis of the situation and try to rise to the occasion and reach to an agreement in Paris. Draw different pathways within that, treaty. But for making a treaty quite effective, we need a lot of political will. We need to, collapse the red lines. Because in negotiation, all countries can't win, and many countries can't lose. So, how best we can make the equations a win-win situation, not taking it as a zero-sum game, making it a positive-sum game, that will be very important. And there should be, within this new treaty, market-based mechanisms and non-market-based mechanisms. And there should be a review process. There should be a robust MRB process, MRB regimes, measurable, reportable, verifiable. That should be the cardinal principle of this new global treaty. Otherwise, the compliance, the enforcement, the legally binding nature can be enshrined. So, that accountability, that political momentum we need to galvanize right now, right this year, to achieve, to deliver a robust, effective, fair and ambitious Paris Treaty. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Right, Martin has to get going. I'm AJ Gambia. I think most of you know me. So I'm going to take questions for the next 15 minutes or so. But first of all, I say thank you very much
Thank you.
for outlining what's going to be a very challenging year. Okay, questions? Yeah.
The world was divided up into Annex 1 and non-Annex 1 under the Convention in 1990. And that was underlined in Kyoto by, again, apportioning the obligations of the developed countries and the opportunities for the developing countries. That, as you suggested, hasn't worked very well. How can we redraw those lines in the new treaty between the richer countries, the emerging economies, and then the various levels of developing countries? Can we have a league table instead?
You see, in Durban, what happened, that we have agreed that all parties will join this treaty. All parties will try to make contribution to this treaty. Everyone should be party to it. Because if everyone is not party to this treaty, then it is not going to deliver the end result, stabilization of global temperature regime to the level of, say, 2 degrees. So that can't be achieved. Even if all the Annex 1 countries, say, drastically cut back their emissions, then also we can't reach that target. So, say, even Bangladesh need to do something, contribute something, though we are not at all responsible for it. We have very little emission, but to give a boost, impetus to others, we need to also contribute in this process. That is the mantra, to strike a global deal, because it is a global commons responsibility to rescue billion people who are on ground zero. So we need to rise to the occasion, try to contribute. Yes, there are sharp firewalls as enshrined in the convention. But in the convention, it was, it is also written that we have to review that annexes. Right? So there are possibilities. There are, say, ground enshrined in the convention. So we should move forward Yes, there are historical responsibilities. We have to make responsible for them, that. But we have to also look forward. So what happens 30 years down the lane, Bangladesh might emerge as a developed country. Once upon a time, Bangladesh was also one of the richest country of the world. Say before 1757, Bangladesh was one of the richest part of the world. That's why, say, East India Company went to Bengal, conquered the rest of the India through Bengal. We were the 6th largest exporting country at that time. Even say Argentina was once upon a time was one of the 10 richest country. Now it is in the bottom rung. So in development economics, what happens say in 100 years, you never know. Because you see, what is money? If you kept it idle, then the price of it, value of it plummets. Then your GDP, GNP will go down. When you never know. Because at times it is like bubbles. If our productive sector is not contributing much. So that way we have to think, and how best we can decarbonize our economy is a huge, huge challenge. There are options. And good news is that at least for tropical countries, the price of renewable, cost of renewable has gone down, but it needs to go down further so that market can play its role. People can afford that, buy that. Then they are not going to say go for coal-fired power stations, generations for electricity.
Just a quick follow-up to that. So do you think that the language of Annex 1 and non-Annex 1 is being left behind now? Will any of that appear in the treaty, in your opinion?
I think there are strong, say, move from Annex 1 countries not to have that kind of annexes. Okay, that kind of division. Though I'll personally happy that if that is there. Maybe there are some changes, amendments. Say, if Bangladesh graduates, if our level of emission significantly rises after say 30 years, Bangladesh should be put in Annex 1. Like say graduation, say that kind of say graduation process, if we can enshrine, that will help. But I don't know because that debate is yet to taking place. So we have to.
The argument over the annexes isn't really about Bangladesh, is it? It's about countries like, not even India, because India's per capita is still very poor. It's about richer, far richer countries which are not classed as developed. So if you forget the least developed countries, and no one's saying they would actually be in the Annex 1, but what about those wealthier countries that are still classed as developing, but which are in no way developing? Qatar, Qatar a developing country. So how do negotiators, how are you going to get past that in the text? Because presumably it will have to be bypassed, if you're going to have a treaty where everyone contributes?
No, you see, say, academically speaking, say, there are flaws in each system, every system. But, say, to remove those flaws is again a challenging task. Because, say, the countries you are referring, they are all part of Group of 77 and China. So, Group of 77 and China is the largest negotiating bloc, and nobody wants to say forgo its own right. But say there should be some principle so that there is automatic graduation process. Because Singapore, you see, say Singapore is a small island developing country. AOCs, seats. And for them, there is some exemptions. Say for least developed countries, there are some preferential treatments. Like, say, AOCs, they also enjoy some preferential treatments. So, even for Maldives, the per capita income of Maldives is very high. But in terms of climatic changes, they are also victim countries, most vulnerable countries. So, one has to also consider that. But anyway, I think there is a growing need to revisit it. But it will be again a challenging task, because no one would be willing to revisit that, especially from developing countries. And also there are some strong position on the part of developed countries. They also try to hold some issues as dear to them.
So, sorry to just stick on this point, there are probably other questions on other issues, but is there going to be a process by which the countries in Annex 1 and out of Annex 1 will be changed compared to what's there at the moment? Will Korea, with its per capita income of above $30,000 per person, now move from non-Annex 1 to Annex 1? Is that on the table?
It is not on the table. Unfortunately, in say climate change negotiation, normally this thing is dealt by United Nations in New York, and they have some criteria, and on the basis of that criteria, it is being decided. But I think there should be some say review process, some revision as per say convention itself in that treaty, so that automatically it can be done without any debate. If say like UN, if we follow those criteria, if Bangladesh is emitting and its income is on the rise, then it will automatically graduate and it will take the burden.
Understood. More questions?
So you represent a large number of countries on the assumption that their interests are generally the same. But do you have examples where two nations perhaps have conflicting views on one point and how, like, what the process to overcome that?
No, I couldn't get you.
So you represent a large group of countries because their interests are generally aligned. But do you have an example where two nations that you represent perhaps have conflicting viewpoints on one issue?
No, for LDCs, we have more or less same point of view, same concerns, because our per capita income is very low, our emission level is very low. Only say regarding some issues we have some differences, but that is not a major one. But for other negotiations, say I am talking about climate change negotiation, for WTO negotiation there are some major issues. But in WTO, say we have say 30 plus countries, but here we have say 48, 49 countries. So, but within that small number of countries, we have some differences, because say some countries are agrarian countries, essentially. Some do have some manufacturing. So those who have manufacturing interest, say cotton, garments, say industries, they have some concerns and conflict of interest to some extent. So, but we try to resolve those through consultations, by consultations. Any group, even say G77 and China, it's a huge group. We have say fast developing countries or emerging countries. We have say oil producing countries. We have say African countries. We have AOCs or CIRS. We have least developed countries. So there are also like-minded countries. There are ILAC. There are say GULAC. So there are say different subgroups. As a big group, we always need to harmonize and try to arc out a common position. Say, at times it is a low-hanging one. At times it is a very loose type of say understanding or issue-based say compromise or say issue-based position we have to take.
Right, yeah, so I was wondering how important do you think it's going to be in the negotiations about so the climate vulnerability and the potential impact of natural hazards. Is that something that is very important to your group of countries?
Yeah, it's very important to our group of countries, and essentially that was why the least developed countries are trying to voice the concerns of the say community people, local people. And coming back to the previous question, say in EU, 28 countries, there are also heterogeneous interests. Say the interest of Poland, the interest of Greece, the interest of couple of other countries are not as UK interest or France interest or say German interest. So because there are some horny issues, even for say carbon reduction target, there are differences. So with that differences we have to work, even in LDCs, even in developing countries.
In Kyoto, developed countries made mitigation pledges, commitments, most of which were to reduce emissions versus 1990. But in a couple of cases, no change versus 1990, and in one, I think, there was an increase allowed. In Paris, all nations are going to come forward with a commitment of some sort Bangladesh or the LDC group reserve the right to commit to allow emissions to increase in the pursuance of economic development?
No, say you are absolutely right. Say we preserve that right, the LDCs, because we are not obliged to make any commitments, because our level of emission is very low, very insignificant, and we also need to develop. But we want to pursue a low carbon pathway so that the global goal can be achieved. Our attempt will be to pursue a low carbon growth pathway, but we also need technology. We need, say, capacity. We need support.
If you were looking at all the countries, 196 countries, would walk into the room in Paris and show their pledges, and you rank them by GDP or whatever, at a certain point, you're moving away from allowing increases in emissions to requiring decreases in emissions. And it's, somewhere along that line of 196 countries, we move from plus to minus. Where does that happen? Because Annex 1, non-Annex 1 is 38 and 130 something. Does the line cross into negative that far up the scale, or is it going to have to come down much further?
No, that's a question of, say, equity and also common but differentiated responsibility. So, if we take those simultaneous equations, that will help reach to a consensus.
But clearly, more countries than before are going to have to commit to reductions.
We expect that.
But you're not going to say how many. You won't say how
No, because that calculations, honestly speaking, we haven't done on behalf of LDCs.
You can see that, according to some analysis that Roberta has been doing over the last few weeks, and I looked at today, on the current policy scenario of the IEA, India and China would account for 40% of global CO2 emissions by 2040. And so there's two examples of countries which I don't think can continue to grow their emissions in the agreement. So wherever the line crosses, I imagine there will be some big countries which would not are not in Annex 1 but will be required to do something or expected to do something quite drastic. Okay, any further questions? Yeah.
When you talk about kind of the need for kind of capacity and support around kind of low carbon pathways and also adaptation, how do you see that kind of fitting into the negotiations? Is it just kind of offers of finance, or do you see it fitting in any other way?
No, I think adaptation is very important, and we have to our high priority attached to mitigation, but we also need adaptation. And for adaptation, you need also, say, technology. Adaptation technology is different than, say, mitigation technology. And there is not much, say, so far adaptation technology innovated. And since it is location specific, site specific, it is also very difficult to, say, replicate, innovate, or expand in a large scale, because there is no one single, say, magic bullet for, say, all the ecosystems, because it is ecosystem specific. Even sub-ecosystem wise, you have to change it. Say, for deltaic country, we need some, say, technology, adaptation technology. And for our coast, we need a different technology. or say uplands are different technology for adaptation. So those kind of technologies are yet to be made available in a large scale to raise the, say, resilience, reduce the vulnerabilities. So that require lot of support.
Interesting, isn't it? A lot of people say technology has become a non-issue now because, China has proven its capability to adopt and adapt technologies on the mitigation side very easily and rapidly, but clearly there are a lot of adaptation technologies which are critical, and there needs to be
Yeah.
a lot of transfer and collaboration on those.
Yeah. Even for, say, adaptation technology, South-South cooperation is also important, because some of the adaptation technologies are being developed in southern countries. So not that all technologies we need to take from, say, developed world, but also some technologies we can share from, say, developing countries, other developing countries, who are, say, applying those and best practices we can replicate, we can take.
Very interesting. Okay, got time for one more question, if there is one. Otherwise, we can draw it to a close. No. All right. Well, go on then.
Well, yeah, it might be a bit of a vexed issue, but so you've talked about a lot of things that you want to add into this agreement this year, and about adaptation and everything. I can mention that one of the issues that's pretty forefront for development, not just especially, is climate refugees. Is there going to be anything on that you want to be added, or is it too difficult to do?
No, in fact, say in Paris Treaty, we want, the LDCs do want to see loss and damage issue, say Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage. And there also, say, the question of, say, human displacement, climate-induced human displacement issue should be dealt this way or that way. Because you see, if we don't raise the level of ambition in terms of mitigation, then in the foreseeable future we are going to have lot of, say, climate-induced displacements. So how to handle that? That issue should be, because this treaty is for, say, next 30 years, 40 years. All treaty can't be done for, say, 5 years, 4 years, 10 years. So we need to foresee what will happen, say, in the year 2030, 2040, 2050. Every day, other day, you can make a revision or make an amendment to a treaty. It takes a lot of time. It takes, say, it needs ratification process. So since we are crafting a treaty, an agreement, we should look beyond the horizon, try to expand the horizon till, say, 2050, 2060, 70, 80, that way.
Okay, let's stop there. But Quamrul, I think we'd like to wish you luck on what's going to be a very challenging next few months ahead. And as I said before, if there's any analysis that you can usefully use.
No, that is essential, because that will empower us, enlighten us. Because in the course of negotiation, if we have, say, latest information, analysis, then we can make prudent decision. Otherwise, we are human beings. We can also make a mistake. Say, when we are crafting the, say, convention itself and Kyoto Protocol, we made a lot of mistakes. Because at that point of time, we didn't know many things. But within that limited, say, knowledge, we crafted both the convention and also Kyoto Protocol. So it is always important to get, say, latest knowledge endowments, analysis, information.
Well, as scientists and researchers, that's very good to
Yeah.
know. So let's all thank Quamrul one more time.
Thank you.